My name is Don Boomgaarden. I've been the Dean of the College of Music and Fine Arts for a little over a year. I come here from Loyola, Baltimore. At Loyola, Baltimore, I was Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, but I had worked for many years in music as a chair of music department at St. Mary's College of Maryland, and I've been in the music business since I was very young. My training was primarily at the Eastman School of Music, where I studied musicology and piano. And I was fortunate enough to receive a Fulbright grant and study at the University of Vienna in Austria for 2 years as well. And so, having come here from Baltimore and the experiences that I've had previously in music, this has been a wonderful opportunity for me to work in the arts and also work on my administrative skills and abilities and try to bring those to help the faculty and students of Loyola to maintain and improve the wonderful reputation of the College of Music and Fine Arts. I started performing when I was 4 years old, and my sister was taking piano lessons, and she was 5 years older than me. And she would come home with her piano book and practice on the piano, and then when she stopped practicing, I would get on the bench and I would play her music. And this so upset my sister that she never studied piano again. And it also was disturbing to my parents, who really didn't know it was a good idea for me to be playing the piano at that age. But I did start at an early age, and throughout my entire life I've maintained my piano performance, first getting a degree in piano as an undergraduate at Texas State University. Previous to that, I studied at Del Mar College even as a high school student. Had wonderful teachers. And then when I went to Eastman, although I was working on my degree in musicology, they allowed me to study with Ellen Martin, who was a very fine pianist at Eastman. Through my work as a church musician, I maintained my playing. So in Catholic churches today, very frequently you'll play the organ and the piano. So I worked on both of those instruments. And I've continued to study and practice. I think for me, as the Dean of a College of Music and Fine Arts, it's important to maintain my own playing. That allows me to relate to my faculty and students. I have a chance and an opportunity to kind of experience what they're experiencing and trying to maintain their playing in a really busy environment of study and teaching. So this fall I'll be playing the Goldberg Variations. I was asked to do this by Joe Hebert, our Director of Winds, and Colonel John Bourgeois, who's a distinguished professor here, former director of the Marine Band, who's doing a new arrangement of the Bach Goldberg Variations for Wind Ensemble. So I'll be playing it in the keyboard version, and then they'll be playing it in the new world premiere of Colonel Bourgeois' arrangement of the Goldberg Variations in November. So I'm very excited about that. And in the process of preparing for that concert, I've actually been studying with almost everyone on the piano faculty here, so I haven't stopped taking lessons. The Goldberg Variations were composed at the end of Bach's career, so around 1740, 1741. In the very first biography of Bach, written by one of his former students, it is described as a set of variations composed for a young artist who was asked to play frequently for his patron at night so his patron could sleep more easily. And this young artist was named Goldberg. Now, what's interesting is that this story only exists in this first retelling many years after Bach's death. When this piece was published, it was published in Bach's lifetime it was not called the Goldberg Variations by Bach. And if you listen to the Goldberg Variations, I think that you'd see that this story is probably specious. It's probably not quite accurate. It sounds really great. It's great fiction. And if you heard just the aria, which is a very languid, beautiful kind of melody, you would think maybe that was something that could induce sleep. But once you get to the first variation, it's so virtuosic and powerful that you begin to see that it's not really a piece written to help anyone sleep. But in fact, it's a compendium of almost every single keyboard technique known to Bach. So the work has running passages, triplets, it's got chordal passages, rapid scale passages, trills, everything imaginable that can be done on the keyboard. But even on a higher level, it's organized as an aria with a series of variations. And every third variation is a canon. So it starts out with a canon at the unison and goes all the way up to the ninth. And these canons usually are for two voices with a third voice underneath just kind of moving through the harmony. And some of the canons are, for example, in contrary motion. So one voice might start in one direction and the second voice comes in the opposite direction. But it's a real tour de force of intellectual skill. So you can appreciate it just from a keyboard technique concept, but you can also see it as a study of an example of Bach's incredible compositional skill, because writing a single canon, even at the unison, is a task, but to write a canon, let's say at the fourth in contrary motion, and to make it sound like music is remarkable. And this is, I think, the reason why the work has developed quite a mystique over the centuries. And it's a very, very beautiful composition. Whether Bach intended it to be played in one sitting for everyone to listen to in a concert hall, unlikely. You know, it's the kind of work where probably you would play a few of the movements at a time, but never the whole thing. A little bit like the Well-Tempered Clavier, you wouldn't play all 48 preludes and fugues in one concert. That wasn't his intent. However, if you do play it as a cycle, as you play the entire piece, it does have a kind of dramatic movement throughout it, and it does work as a single piece. And so it kind of goes through all of the various moods and affections that Bach was trying to create in the audience in a very, very logical way. And it ends with some very, very dramatic variations. And finally, a repetition of the aria that started it all. And what's interesting is that the aria, although it's a variation on the aria, it's actually a variation on a chord pattern. So the aria itself is a variation of a chord pattern. So it's kind of like a passacaglia, what's called a passacaglia, which is a series of chords. And then the aria is layered onto it. And then every variation follows exactly the same harmonic pattern. So when you listen to it, it's difficult to believe that these variations are so closely related, but when you study them harmonically, you see, my goodness, it's the same set of chords that were in the aria. So it's one of the most fascinating pieces of Johann Sebastian Bach's. It's a real honor to play it, and I've been working on it for over a year now. I'd not played it before in public, and I'm looking forward to it. It's very exciting. I think that when as I've worked on this piece, I've often had to do a lot of traveling. As dean, I visit a lot of cities and talk to alumni groups and do fundraising in other cities. And when I'm on the plane, I will get out the score and frequently listen to other artists' performances of them, and sometimes just look at the score myself. And so you're constantly working primarily on interpretation, because the challenge of a work of that size is that it's also a study in the variation of approaches of interpretation. So one movement is a kind of a beautiful melodic aria, and the next movement is almost like an etude of some kind, and then the next movement is a very, very intricate fugue, and every one of those has a special personality. And trying to find the right interpretation as you go through this entire spectrum of human emotion is one of the challenges. And that's something that really is best done away from the music, because when you're caught up in playing it, you don't often think of it this way. But when you're sitting there listening to it or going through it mentally, you begin to see, what are the important emotions and moods that are being covered in the course of this piece. Well, there are arrangements of the Goldberg variations for other ensembles. There's a string arrangement that I've heard that's quite beautiful. Many of Bach's works for keyboard can be transcribed for other groupings. This is because the music is so fundamentally beautiful in sound, so that you could take a fugue from the Well-Tempered Clavier and play it on 3 saxophones, and it would sound wonderful. Seriously, I mean, I've heard that done. You can take a prelude from the little preludes of Anna Magdalena Bach and play it on a xylophone, and it's gorgeous. So Bach's music is so beautiful, and it's not limited just to the instrument that it was originally written for. So I saw some of Colonel Bourgeois' arrangements even last summer. He was showing me what he'd already worked on, because he's been working on this project for years, evidently. And it looked delightful. It reminded me a lot of, there's a wonderful arrangement for instruments of Bach's Art of Fugue by a musicologist named Wolfgang Grätzer, who was one of the first editors of the new Bach edition back in the 1920s and 30s. And Grätzer wrote an edition of the Art of Fugue for various chamber groups, so string quartet, woodwind quintet, all kinds of variety in that piece, and it works beautifully. The Art of Fugue is theoretically written for organ. It can be played on the harpsichord, but it's wonderful when it's played by other instruments. The Goldberg variations, because it is so oriented towards keyboard virtuosity, it'll be very interesting to hear the wind ensemble version, because it will involve a lot of virtuosic playing. Of course, we're lucky that we have one of the best wind ensembles in America with the Loyola Wind Ensemble, plus we'll be augmenting it with a few of our faculty members as well. So I anticipate that to be something really, really gorgeous, and something Bach would have loved. I'm sure he'd be thrilled to hear that. Loyola University is one of 28 Jesuit universities, but it's the only one that has a large college of the performing arts. So this makes us unique. It's one of the special things about Loyola New Orleans, and it may be fortuitous, or it may be God's will, that He has put such a fantastic college of music and fine arts in such a fantastic city of music and fine arts, so that in a way one feeds on the other. And the first thing I noticed in coming to New Orleans, I went to a few concerts and events, not only here at the college, but also the LPO, the Louisiana Philharmonic, the opera, and I began to hear performances on such a high level with such incredible musicality. And then when I heard my students performing at the college, it was the same thing. And I thought, what is it that is creating this really special synthesis and relationship between the city and the arts and the performances that I'm hearing? Certainly, there's a depth of musicality that is remarkable to me. I'm sure that some of it is related to the events of 5 years ago, the events of Katrina. There's a kind of depth in the people because they've lived through a tragic experience, and that reveals itself in their performances, whether it's jazz, serious classical music, popular music of various types. It doesn't really seem to matter. Somehow it comes out. And so when I'm talking to parents about our college, one of the things that I point out is that students who come here are often transformed very quickly. Hearing beautiful music performed causes young people to want to perform that way as well. Music is not something that you can learn in a book, even though all of us have tried. Sometimes someone will say, well, I got this really good book that's going to teach me how to play the violin. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. You need a teacher. You need to sit in a room with a person who plays back for you. You imitate them. It's a very, very ancient approach to teaching. And so what Loyola New Orleans has to offer its students is that kind of education. That's one of the reasons why even after Katrina, we had the highest retention rate of any of the colleges, not only with students but also faculty, because of their devotion to their art and how their art sees them through those types of things. And this is something St. Ignatius would have enjoyed. You know, he was all about personal one-on-one education, education which was logical and progressive, and also he was about trying to change the world around us into a better place through the gifts that we have. So if you're an artist or you're a performer, you have a gift from God, and this is an opportunity to refine it and then take it out into the world and transform the world and make it a better place. Young people today are looking for something to believe in. They're looking towards something that has a mission, that's something higher than just making money or just becoming famous. They want to do something that transforms the world. And our students are constantly trying to perfect themselves, putting themselves out there in front of one another and also in front of the community to do so. And then many of them then go on and have fantastic careers. So we have several students that are performing. We have a student that performed at Boomgaarden this year, several students that have performed at the Met. All of these things are a part of that kind of powerful musical, artistic emphasis that you have in the city of New Orleans when you get here. And Loyola is a vehicle for people to kind of get in touch with that and unleash it. You know, inspiration in the arts is really important. We always say, you know, a great performance should seem as if it was improvised. It just came out of the air. But that improvisation, when it happens, is stored up practicing and work. So it's like as you work and practice and develop yourself, then that magical moment comes where suddenly it just spills out on stage, or it spills out across a canvas or a graphic arts design or in a theatrical performance. And people in the audience think, oh, that was a fantastic improvisation. It was amazing how they were able to just do that, pull that out of thin air. They don't know the years that have gone into that. So when I talk to parents about this, I try to talk about the discipline of the arts to show them that even if their young person may not have a great career in the arts, they're going to have a great education and be able to apply what they've learned in the arts to anything they do. What I learned as a pianist, for example, was to sit for many hours, take things apart, turn them upside down, practice one hand at a time, use a metronome, play it in different rhythms, play it in different keys, all the kinds of intricate ways of solving problems. This is the same thing I do when I sit down in front of a spreadsheet to do the budget for the college. It's the same thing. And so it gives me an advantage, I think, over others, my musical training, because I think that musical training and artistic training helps you to become a problem solver and helps you to think creatively. So whatever the student is going to do later in life, whether they become a great artist or not, that discipline and training is going to be transferable into any kind of activity. Plus, they will have had an opportunity to experience beauty and greatness. So when we introduce them to the works of Mozart, or the works of Bach, or the works of Duke Ellington, whatever it happens to be, they are going to come away from that with an experience of greatness. Something else that young people long for. They long for that opportunity to touch greatness and to be a part of that. And there's nothing more immediate or powerful than the arts to communicate that. I have two stepdaughters, and I've had many conversations with them about their careers and what their plans are for the future. So I relate very much with what parents go through when they have a young person and they're really concerned about their future, especially if they themselves are not artists. And they're worried about what's going to happen if their student studies trumpet or music industry or whatever it happens to be. And I would go back to what I was saying previously, that first of all, the students are getting a great education. At a Jesuit institution, unlike a school like Eastman, undergraduates have to take a very rigorous general curriculum. That general curriculum includes languages, it includes the sciences, it includes the social sciences, it includes, of course, philosophy and religion. So they come out of their Jesuit education, just as St. Ignatius wanted them to, and that is to have a broad spectrum of knowledge and a critical understanding of how to approach knowledge. So even if a student here is majoring in piano, they are still going to get a very fine general liberal arts education. This is seen by some of my colleagues in the musical world as a disadvantage. They would say, well, that's all the time they could have spent practicing. And I'm like, you know, there'll be plenty of time to practice in the future, but this is a golden moment in their lives to show them something greater than that. So I would say to a parent, first of all, that if you have a student majoring in the arts, they aren't just studying the arts. They're studying this broad spectrum of knowledge. And I would probably say that a student here majoring in music or visual arts or theater would receive as good of a liberal arts education as they might receive in many other places, even if they weren't studying the arts, because there's so much of it. Secondly, the role of a parent sometimes is a hard one, because we want to help our children and we often think we know better based on our experiences. But frequently, that young person has a goal or a dream, and it may not be the dream that we have for them. And sometimes it's our job to support that dream even when we're a little scared of it. It's a leap of faith. When St. Ignatius founded the Jesuits, there was a small group of men, I think it's fair to say a ragtag group of men, who didn't really have much of a plan and didn't really know what they were going to be doing, but they had a sense of a mission. And there was something within them, kind of a longing for God, that was so powerful. And when you look at young people who have a real powerful longing for saxophone, trumpet, guitar, painting, sculpture, you can see that there's this kind of inner passion. And for a parent, it can be scary, but one of the things you have to do is realize that if you ask your son or daughter to do something practical in your mind, many times you're also asking them to give up something that is so powerful that eventually will lead them through the hardships of life and give their life meaning and depth. So it may seem difficult at first when you have those conversations that your child wants to become an artist, but once you start to see, first of all, they're getting a great education, and secondly, how happy they are at realizing their dream, then you kind of let that go. But I think as a parent, you're always going to be a little anxious about your child. I don't know if that ever goes away. But I know my own father, my father was a naval officer, and I remember telling him that I was going to be a piano major. And it was a difficult conversation for him because he had another dream in mind for me. And, but he was kind enough to allow me to pursue it, although he did tell me I had to get an education certificate, which I did. But after he came to my first recital, my first full recital, junior recital, he was a fan, and we kind of never looked back from there. But I just tell parents to try to understand that your child is going to receive a great education no matter what they study here, and they're going to learn life skills that they can apply to any career. People nowadays in all the professions will tell you what they're looking for in employees is not so much the area that they majored in. What they're looking for are people who can write, who can express themselves, and who can think creatively and problem solve, and who are good workers. Music and the arts will train you in all of those things. So if a student gets a degree in piano here and decides, you know what, I think I really should have become a lawyer, they can go to law school and be very, very successful at it. So even if you went out and talked to employers today, many times they will seek out music majors or arts majors for positions that are not at all related to that because they know those people will be problem solvers. And usually once I talk to parents in this way, they understand it. and it allows them to have a little bit of peace of mind in terms of helping their son or daughter achieve their dreams. Well, for students who come to Loyola, there are a couple of real practical pieces of advice that I think all the faculty would share with them. One of them is to realize that you are embarking upon a course of study which will challenge you, and you will, from time to time, fail. It's not the failure that's important, it's what you do with the failure. All artists go through processes of development, and your teachers will, as gently as possible, lead you along that path so that you can improve constantly. But I think it's a bit of a shock for some young people to be put into that environment where they are going to be judged, they are going to have juries, they are going to be in front of their peers presenting what they're doing, and it can be a little intimidating. But that's kind of the first step of becoming an artist, is learning how to present yourself and learning how to present what it is that you're doing, and dealing with criticism, constructive criticism, not negative criticism, but constructive criticism to improve yourself. So my first word of advice to students is don't be too sensitive. Realize that everyone around you is trying to help you. So when your teacher says, you know, I think you played that better last week, it's not meant as a personal attack, it's just an observation. It's hard for us to let go of that sometimes, but it's a really important part of development. You'll notice in life in general, people who are willing to accept criticism are the ones who go the farthest and have the most interesting lives. So learning to accept good criticism. Secondly, I would tell students that nothing can be accomplished without hard work. So there will be many hours of hard work involved. As I said with the idea of inspiration, it may look like inspiration to the audience, but trust me, to those performers, it is not an overnight sensation. It's an overnight sensation 8 years in the making. You know, when you see a student, for example, Angela Menino sang at the Met last spring. I think she sang in Lulu, and I'm sure there were people in the audience saying, oh, what a wonderful singer, that's amazing that she was able to do that. Well, that's the product of many, many years of work. And so I would say to all students that be prepared to work, be prepared to be pushed much further than you thought you could go. Our job here is to expand the horizons of our students and to create a warm and supportive environment for them to do that. In other words, we're trying to get them to grow artistically and philosophically, spiritually, and those things are all linked together. The spiritual growth that students undergo between the ages of 18 and 21 or so relates very much to their musical growth. I have found many, many times the great artists I have known have also been just great people. They've been on a spiritual journey as well as an artistic journey. And you can see this in our faculty again and again and again. So many of them are simply astonishing people, not just great artists, but astonishing people. And that's why the students love them. That's why the students, we can hardly get them out of here when they graduate. They want to stay here forever, and we have to kind of push them out into the world sometimes. So students, be prepared to work, but work in a positive and caring environment. And then lastly, I would say that for students and in terms of being successful is do make that extra effort to get to know your teachers and to connect with them. The Jesuits have a word, magis, that they describe, which simply means more in Latin. And what they mean by that is to do that one small extra thing more to make the world a better place every day. And we should apply that term magis also to our own development, to do that one extra thing. Maybe we're tired, we don't really want to practice that extra half hour, we don't really want to go to that class that day, we don't want to go to that concert, whatever it is, to do that one extra thing more every day. It doesn't have to be much, just a little bit. And it falls into the Ignatian concept of personal improvement. Ignatius was a child of the Renaissance. If you think of the great Renaissance artists like Leonardo, Michelangelo, it was all about this constant journey of improvement, improving yourself, being greater. And so it's not surprising that the Jesuits themselves had this kind of Renaissance view of man, that first of all, man should be should develop in all kinds of different areas. It shouldn't just be limited to one speciality. And secondly, that he or she should constantly be developing themselves and improving. So being open to that constant improvement of magis would be the final thing I would say to a student to help them to succeed here. My duties as dean involve not only supporting the faculty and supporting the students, but also making sure we have the resources to do that. So I oversee the faculty budgets, the operational budgets, the endowments, the special professorships. I'm out on the road doing a lot of fundraising and working with people in the community to support the college. And of course, people think of deans as you know, that's a person that's kind of in charge. And I'd have to say, first of all, that's an illusion. I oversee a very, very complex enterprise, and I do my best to facilitate and to help the faculty to accomplish their goals. I had a good friend once, a physics professor from Austria, who there was a big debate at the university I was at the time on the common curriculum and what should the curriculum look like, and we need this course and this course and this course should follow this course and this course should not follow that course. And finally he became frustrated and I could see he was getting irritated, and I said, what's wrong? You seem to be unhappy. And he said, well, I think it's great to talk about the curriculum, but if you have a great faculty, it doesn't matter. And I'm not sure I'd go that far, but I do believe that faculty members and students need to be given the latitude to accomplish their dreams. And so I see my role as someone who facilitates that, and I do my best to help guide them as I can. But it is a very, very important part of my job to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. The faculty expects me to help give them some direction every year in terms of where they're going. But I've found that many times if I just sit back and listen to them, after a while a consensus will grow. People will begin to see that, yes, that's the direction we want to go in. Sometimes it's more like a conversation than management. So you allow people to talk, and as they talk, they'll begin to go through all the various possibilities, sometimes many more than even I could think of. And if you go back, and I'm referring a lot to Ignatius today, but if you go back and look at St. Ignatius's letters, many, many times he'll be talking to one of the priests about an idea he has, and invariably he will say, of course, if you have a better idea, that's fine with me. And it's interesting, he means that sincerely. He has ideas, but even in his position, he was very open to listening to the creative ideas of those around them. So I think any dean has to be like that, and we're lucky at Loyola to have a whole set of deans, not just myself, but Dean Lokander in the business school, and Dean Cruz in humanities, and Dean Moran in social sciences, are all fantastic at listening to their faculty and developing a plan based upon the consensus of what their faculty is offering them. But a part of being a dean, of course, is to set the tone for your college, and so I'm very lucky. I came into a college which was already so excellent that my job primarily was just to make sure that we were able to kind of continue what we were doing. So I haven't really had to do very much other than to try to give some shape to conversations and to try to point in certain directions. All the deans, of course, also have to try to implement the ideas and the goals of the president and the provost. And we're fortunate there too, because our provost is the former dean of this college, so he understands our situation better than anyone. And we have an excellent president, Father Wilds, who is basically just an example of the sophistication and the wonderful personal skills that many of the Jesuit priests have. So for me, the management part of the job is really more about trying to understand the complexity of the organism and then trying to listen to the faculty and the students to make sure that we go in the direction that seems to make the most sense to everyone. One of the things that we see in higher education today is an increasing detachment of the state and government from higher education. If you looked at the statistics, it's astonishing how the money that used to flow to universities and colleges, public and private, has been cut back and cut back and cut back. It is a fraction of what it used to be. We are fortunate because as a private institution, we've planned for this. We have an endowment and we have wonderful people in our financial offices, and we run a lean, mean operation. I mean, we're very careful with our money. But many state institutions, for example, in Louisiana, are suffering terribly. They've had to let go many people. They've had to cut back programs. So this is a culture and a time when private donorship takes on an even greater significance. And a private donor can have an impact of great dimension on a student and on a program. So I say to donors all the time, you know, you can use your money in many, many different ways. God has given you this special gift, and you can use it as a steward in many ways. You can give it towards a building project. You can give it towards some type of special social program. It's kind of up to you. However, what I would say is that when you give it to Loyola, you're giving it to a living monument, and that's a student who's going to go out into the world and transform it. So it's a very, very personal and intense relationship. We have a dinner every year where the donors to our scholarships meet with the students that they're supporting. And I went for the first time last year, and it was fantastic. So you have the donor sitting at the table, and next to that donor, who perhaps they've never met, is the student who's receiving the scholarship that that donor has given them. And it was so powerful to see how excited both parties were, the donor and the student, to be able to connect on that level. And for the donors, I think, to see the incredible, powerful impact that their donation is making. And it doesn't have to be a big donation either. I mean, we have lots of ways to take in the gifts of donors, and we're also very transparent in what we do with it. If you give your money to Loyola for a particular program or for a particular scholarship, that's exactly where it goes. And it's not just some kind of general fund and one never knows what's happening. We can tell you exactly what we're doing, and we can have the students show you what they're doing. So in many ways, I have an enviable job, because trying to connect with donors and talk about a School of the Performing Arts in New Orleans, which is one of the best in the country, is something most deans would love to be able to do. So when I bring out a student that plays the violin or sings for my visiting committee, and there's just silence and then incredible applause afterwards, they can see very clearly where their money's going, and it makes them feel really good. And that's, I think, the special thing about being a benefactor and being a donor, is doing something which has a long-lasting impact. We have many donors that have been giving regularly to Loyola and the College of Music and Fine Arts for 20 or 30 years. Sometimes it's a generational thing. We have several families in New Orleans, for example, who've given to us for generations. And so we have this warm relationship with them. And I do my best to connect with them and speak with them. But I would just say to anyone who is looking for an opportunity to make a difference in the world through a gift, that there is simply nothing better to give to than to an actual living young person who's going to go out into the world and transform it. We have a strategic plan that was approved by the President and the Board of Trustees. And the College of Music and Fine Arts is a part of that plan. And together with the faculty last year, we created a vision plan for the College of Music and Fine Arts. And within that plan, we refer to national reputation. In other words, right now, Loyola has a great regional reputation and some national reputation in the arts. But what we would like to do over the next 3 to 5 years is to increase that reputation through better marketing, more frequent performances, and to make people aware of the greatness of the school. There are 2 reasons for this, at least. One reason is that it's the truth. This is really one of the best performing arts colleges in the country. It's a well-kept secret. And secondly, it fits into the dreams and aspirations of the faculty and students. That's what they want. They want to get out there and perform, show their art, transform the world, and make a difference. And so it's a vision and a mission which links directly to the desires of the faculty and students. And I think that's a key. So when I look at the future for Loyola, I see this tremendous opportunity and a tremendous force and power that is a part of the artistic longing, the desire for connection with people, not just for personal aggrandizement or reputation, but to bring that special spiritual quality of the arts to the entire nation and to make Loyola New Orleans a kind of showplace for the arts and for the Jesuit approach to education, which is so much a part of it.